Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Ultra Mono by IDLES. This is the third full-length album of the UK post-punk and art punk project IDLES, who in the past few years made two quite exceptional albums for the punk scene. Brutalism, which was an explosive debut and an album that definitely showed a lot of potential for the band, and an even more highly acclaimed sophomore project with the release of Joy as an Act of Resistance. Two albums that have managed to be considered amongst the most important punk projects to emerge in the late 2010s, and this is something that I definitely can see and I do understand it. It's really interesting to see projects with such sharp musicianship and such sharp lyricism to emerge in recent years. I mean, their sound is more approachable, it can attract a more wide range of people. It's not like you're listening to a filthy crust punk cassette that was just meant to be released in the underground punk scene, but it's still really interesting to see such a recent band in a genre like this to get this amount of popularity, which in my opinion is really deserving, especially coming through an era where you see more and more people would have this idea that punk is dead, which is obviously a false statement. I think that this doesn't apply to literally every genre. I don't find that a genre can become dead, and this is definitely not the case with post-punk and art punk at all. You could say that recently there are less impactful art punk and post-punk releases, but there's also this new recent idea that talking about politics is a double-edged sword and that it has become kind of a dated statement. So for me, I'm really glad that there are still bands like IDLES out there that have a really sharp and intense artistic statement, and they've managed to get the popularity they have. Of course, this ended up creating controversies, but I'm honestly not surprised. With that being said, I really appreciate what they did with the previous two albums, though I would say musically they're not two of those projects that they would make me really come back to. I find that Brutalism was an intriguing album. It was not a project that I loved, but I definitely found it a really interesting debut. And on the other hand, I would say that Joy as an Act of Resistance was just slightly more underwhelming for me. I didn't find that many moments that would make me come back to this album, but it was still an okay project. And then we get into this third one, Ultra Mono, which I got into it not necessarily having high or low expectations, and after listening 4 of the teaser tracks they released, my opinions were slightly mixed, considering that there were 2 tracks that I enjoyed a lot, and then there were 2 others that slightly underwhelmed me, so I didn't really know what to expect out of this album. So listening to these 4 tracks, I pretty much knew what to expect from this new album from IDLES. I knew what I was about to get, I knew what I was going to expect. So for me, it was kind of surprising that Ultra Mono is considered so far to be by far the worst work out of IDLES, which really kind of surprised me, considering that I don't find that this album offers something that much inferior compared to the previous 2 works. Some of the concerns I saw about this album was the fact that it was quite similar and identical with the previous 2 works, and I mean, I didn't really know what more or less to expect. I mean, I don't really find that Joy as an Act of Resistance made something that much different compared to Brutalism, but it's still considered kind of a superior sophomore album. Then the other concern I saw was about the lyrical content, for the fact that it was way more simplistic and that it didn't handle perfectly the current situation, which I mean, I obviously expected IDLES to have some strong points about the current circumstances. So I guess the issue was apparently the way it was handled. I didn't really find the more simplistic approach of the lyrics to create that much of an issue, in my opinion. But other than that, what I have to say about Ultra Mono is that, in my opinion, musically, this one is my favorite project from them so far. It is definitely similar with the previous 2 works, there's no doubt about that. There's not like a certain development to their sound, sound, but this is not necessarily what I expected. Instead, in my opinion, they took all of the elements from the previous two albums that made their sound and their approach on art punk and post-punk appealing, and that they put some of the greatest ideas and some of the most compelling artistic statements in Ultramono. I actually find, compared to the previous two works, that this is the one album that makes me want to come back to it, and it is the one album that I found the biggest amount of highlights. And even in terms of production, I find that in some occasions, not all of them, this is the heaviest IDLES have ever sound before, and I really think that in some occasions it feels like their most well put together and their most well produced album so far. The album makes a very interesting introduction with the track War. It has some really interesting use of sounds and the overall punk elements to it, and the production in general. It is a really intriguing song in terms of structure, in terms of development, in terms of progression. For me though, the true highlights start with the track Grounds, which in my opinion it has already become one of my favorite works from IDLES. Quite simplistic and straightforward with its melody and its structure, but it's just simply effective. Its punchy production, its heavy guitars, all of the electronic sound that are quite unsettling. Now, it doesn't have one of the greatest performances vocally, but I overall enjoy how expressive the vocals are, especially in this particular album. Then we move on with the other teaser track I really enjoyed, Mr. Motivator. I really like how sentimental and how cute in occasions this track is, and it's nice that it has this feel that it's such an aggressive track, but it's also kind of wholesome, and I really like it. The highlights just keep coming with the excellent Anxiety, another really aggressive song that, especially towards the second half, I really like all of the vocal passages, its whole progression. It is a very well put together track. The track Kill Them With Kindness is not one of my favorites as a whole thing, but I do find it that it has one of the catchiest and one of the most intriguing choruses out of this whole project. And then we get into the track Model Village, which was one of the teaser tracks that I was kind of indifferent towards it. I mean, I find that it has some interesting moments, but for the most part, I think that it has an overall slow pacing, and its main saving grace, in my opinion, is its catchy chorus. Then we get into the other final great highlight, in my opinion, which is the 7th track, Ne touche pas moi. Short, catchy, heavy, just an effective track from start to finish. Then it's at this point where the album becomes slightly repetitive and doesn't have that many great moments to it. I mean, the track Carcinogenic, I find that it has an interesting chorus to it, but I find it to be kind of repetitive, and its drum beat is almost identical with the one from the previous two tracks. With the next two moments, with the tracks Range and The Lover, they were not two of my favorite tracks, but I still found some intriguing moments to them, something that would make them stand out in the track listing. In the case of Range, it is explosive production, especially on the chorus, and then the track The Lover has some nice vocal inflections here and there. The album, in my opinion, saves the worst for last. The track Aim was the one track that didn't really excite me going forward to this album. Like, when I listened to Aim, I thought it was such an underwhelming and boring song. It had a really slow pace. It would really lack any sort of intensity, and even listening to it more and more, it didn't manage to grow on me. In my opinion, it's definitely one of the most forgettable moments out of this album, if not the most forgettable. Then with the track Danke, we actually close the album with one of the more punchy and the more energetic moments. It makes for a far better conclusion compared to the album ending with I'm, for example. But it's another track that has kind of similar elements with other tracks. It doesn't really offer something that much more or new. And that's all I have to say about Ultramono. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with the release of this album. It obviously has its shortcomings, but out of the three albums, this is the one that clicked with me the most. This is the one I see myself coming back the most, and this is the one that I found the biggest amount of highlights. And overall, this is a solid art punk and post-punk release for 2020. I'm going to give Ultramono a 7+ out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.